Should I have a trigger warning on this video? Not for you, for me. Hey everyone, Jeremy here. Today I'm going to talk about something that is not controversial at all. No one ever talks about it on the internet, and in fact, I might be the very first person. Will the Star Wars sequels stay canon? Yes, episodes 9, well, 7, 8, and 9. I was almost going to go 9, 8, 7. That doesn't make as much sense. The sequels, which are loved by some, many of you out there love them, and I have zero qualms with you loving them. If you love them, you love them. You love the crap out of them. You enjoy them as much as you can. But there are some of us out here that really did not like them. There are very passionate people out there that just loathe them. We've got all kinds of different camps. I'm kind of in the middle. I don't hate them. I just look at them and say, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. So that's where I kind of am. I'm just kind of in the middle. They didn't work, but they are, without a doubt, no matter which side you're on, they are divisive. They are so divisive, it's ridiculous. And quite frankly, the entire fandom knows it, and there's no way Disney doesn't know it either. In fact, they're not just divisive in fandom, if you really think about it. They're divisive in pop culture in general. It's not just the hardcore Star Wars fans that are having issues with it. The general audiences didn't gravitate towards it either. That's just reflected in everything. The normal stuff you would normally see for something this big, like an Avengers Endgame. Let's say, just remove Star Wars from it and use Marvel, another Disney property. Avengers Endgame, you see nothing but tie-in stuff everywhere. That's just expected of a massive film. And quite frankly, we're 2 years out from Endgame, and I still run into Endgame merchandise everywhere. Stuff is still coming out from these movies. The thing is, that kind of stopped with the sequels. The sequels, on the other hand, there's been merchandising tie-ins, but it kind of came into the zeitgeist and left just as quickly. Like, I'm not talking about us with fans. Fans-wise, we're, talking about it and speculating on it and things like that. I'm talking about the general public. The general public doesn't really talk about the sequels anymore. It's not really a part of the conversation. It's kind of like, honestly, it's kind of like Game of Thrones. After Game of Thrones ended and it was such a disappointment, to some enjoyed it, but after it ended, most people just stopped talking about it. Nobody talks about Game of Thrones anymore, and that's kind of where the sequels are right now. It's just, whether you loved it or hate it, nobody really talks about them much anymore, unless you do love it. If you really loved it, then you're still talking about it. And everything I just said makes it sound like, well, if nobody's talking about it, the fans didn't gravitate towards it, the general audience didn't gravitate towards it, then they're not going to stay canon. They've got an out. They've got a couple of outs. It's science fiction, for one. That's always an out in itself. But they introduced a time travel-ish thing in Star Wars Rebels not that long ago, which is a part of the canon. But I'm going to go completely against that and say, no, they're going to stay canon. And I'm going to tell you why. All those reasons I just said are perfectly valid reasons. Plus the whole being divisive. I mean, that's a part of it. Being divisive is a huge part of it. The fact that it's left the zeitgeist. The fact that they're really making no money off merchandising or tie-ins. There's no series based on Rey coming out in her younger years, or some tie-in character to, like, Babu Frick isn't getting his own spin-off. No, they're just done with that whole area right now. So you would think that, wiping the slate clean would be easy and a no-brainer. I'm saying it's not going to happen. That's my theory. Well, it's so easy to say, and I've heard people say this before, businesses don't do that. Which is true-ish. But no one's ever done this on this scale. So that's not to say it couldn't happen. It's not to say that's a reason why not to do it. But ultimately, while it would make a lot of fans happy, it would incense a part of the fan base that isn't incensed. In other words, they've already got half the fan base who's not happy with them. So if they wipe this clean, they're only quasi making the half that weren't happy, because all they're really doing is making them, they're going from unhappy to we're okay. But the other side, which is way up here in all happiness and Raylo-ness, and they want that Babu Frick tie-in series, you're dragging them all the way down to here. See where that math is? That's only going to here. this is going all the way down here. So if you do that, you're not really going to help the fan base as much as you think. It's probably a little more like this to this, but it's still going to really, it's a very marginal in how you're going to make the fan base happy, at least from their point of view. I think it would actually be more, but from a marketing perspective, they're probably looking at it about like that. Now there's the other problem where, even just from a narrative standpoint, people want to use World Between Worlds to say, well, you can reboot the sequels because we now have a time travel device. I don't think that's true. I don't think the World Between Worlds was ever meant to be that. In fact, World Between Worlds, if anything, proved that everything in Star Wars is in a closed loop, that time travel actually isn't possible, that you can't actually change the events. Because if you've seen Rebels, and I don't want to spoil this too much, so I'm going to be vague here. In case you haven't seen Rebels, go watch Rebels. It's a fantastic show. When time was changed, it really wasn't changed. A character pulled another character out of an event where we never saw their demise. We never saw if they lived. We never really saw if they died. We didn't know what happened to them. And it was very much a Schrodinger's cat. This character was both alive and dead for us. The thing is, that's fine, because that's not even time travel. I mean, it is, but it's determination. I'm not a physicist, and I'm probably not up on my time travel lingo as much as I should be. I'm just a nerd. I'm just a sci-fi geek. I was about to go into more on that, but let's just say I consider it a closed loop. I could do a whole video on that, and I might later, but I just don't think World Between Worlds works that way. But then the other thing is, it's not as much the fans that Disney has to worry about appeasing, it's the shareholders. And while some of them are fans, the problem is, if you were to say, we're going to wipe the slate clean and say the sequels, those never happened. What is that telling your investors? How much faith and how much confidence are they going to have in you that you've literally said an entire saga of films, which quite frankly made $1 billion per movie, you're going to reset those because the fans aren't happy? That shows an unprecedented level of lack of vision. That is just bonkers, because you would be telling the entirety of the people investing in your company that leadership didn't know how to do its job and invested millions upon millions of their money, as well as their own, into projects they didn't have faith in, that they didn't not just have faith in, but they've lost faith in now. They never had a direction. You're admitting every fault. Admitting that to the fans is one thing. Admitting that to the people who hold the purse strings, that's very different. You are now going to lose investor confidence, and that is something no business ever wants. I'm not a stock market guy, just like I'm not a, physicist, but I know it well enough to know that you don't want to shake that confidence. There are rebuttals to all of this. There are absolutely rebuttals to all of this, because quite frankly, I'm thinking of them as I'm talking. Things like, well, if you presented everything I just said about the whole investors losing faith, things like that, if you presented it in a way that, no, we're recognizing our errors, we see where we could have done better, so instead we're going to make new sequel movies. We're going to come up with a really cool plan on how they don't work anymore, or how they don't exist anymore, and why they don't exist. And we're going to get Star Wars back on track. If you could deliver that type of message to the investors, yeah, 100%, you can go for it. Yeah, sky's the limit. Problem is, that is threading the needle. That is so, you've got to bullseye that, because even slightly off one way or the other, you are not going to deliver that message, and you're just going to shake their confidence. Look at something like CD Projekt Red and Cyberpunk 2077. That has been a very controversial game because they didn't do well. It did not land well. What has also happened is they've put out apologies and they've tried to explain what happened, but it's also backfired a bit on them, because a lot of the fans and investors are seeing what they're saying and don't believe them. They think they're just the victims of bad management, bad advertising, or misleading advertising. All these things. They're seeing all the negatives. Again, they didn't bullseye it. They did not thread that needle, one side or the other, and you're toast. And that's what happened to them. And right now, they're still digging themselves out of that hole. Disney is already in the hole. They know they're in the hole. But the thing is, they're in the hole with fans. They're fine with investors. The investors love them. They're still making them hand over, what's the phrase? Money hand over fist? I've never understood that phrase. They're still making them money, so they don't care. They just want them to continue making them money. So it's a very delicate situation where they would have to reboot without making themselves look weak. And how do you do that? And sadly, that's why I think we will not see them de-canonized anytime soon. It doesn't mean, that's right now. That is right now. As of right now, season 2 Mandalorian is in the books. We're waiting on season 3. We've got the Boba Fett series coming, so on and so forth. But I think Disney has zero plans to touch that trilogy, that timeline. They're doing nothing with it. The only way they would is, I've talked about the fact that I would love to see a Luke Skywalker show where it does bring in Kylo Ren, where it does bring in Ben Solo as his Padawan. I could see them doing something like that. But I think that's the only way they'll ever touch it again, is if we're seeing like young Ben Solo training with Luke. That's as much as we're going to see them touch it in the next 10 to 20 years. If they decanonize this and say we're making new sequels, you're looking at 20 years from now. I will be a much older and gray man, or from your perspective, an older and grayer man than I am now by the time that happens. I think our best bet at this point is to do kind of, if you're a fan of the sequels, like I said, love them to death, hold them, cherish them, cradle them to sleep at night. For those of us who aren't thrilled with it, or those who downright loathe it, the best thing you can do at this point, just ignore it. I mean, really, it's just don't make it a part of your even thought process at this point, because quite frankly, if Disney's ignoring it, we might as well too for the time being. I mean, I don't see them ever going back to it, other than, like I said, like a Luke series or something like that, where it's going to reference things that come later. I really hope this was clear. I really hope that you understood everything I was trying to say, because quite frankly, I kind of just was thinking about this today and realized I wanted to make a video on it and talk about it, because it does come up in the comments very often, and I've never really sat down and talked to you guys completely about it. So I thought I'd just make a whole video on it and get it out there, and I'm sure I'm going to remember 10 things I didn't say as soon as I wrap up filming. This is my feelings for the most part. It really comes down to a business decision. They perceive it as having more negative impacts than it would positive. So yeah, I think we're just kind of stuck with looking at them as the outlier series while we enjoy everything else. Those who love it, and go right ahead. You get it. You get to watch all 9 movies in a row and be super happy about it. The rest of us have to watch 6 movies and a few like Rogue Ones and, a couple seasons of Mandalorian and be happy. And quite frankly, that's pretty awesome in itself. Are you thinking I'm way off? Am I not making any sense here? Leave your comments below. Maybe there's a loophole that I haven't thought about that negates this whole, Disney as a business thing, and they don't want to do it. Maybe you've got your own theory on that. Leave your comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe to see more content like this. All right, and before I go, as always, please take care of yourselves, and please take care of each other. Thanks for watching.